What is a nation?
Apa itu bangsa?
The attempt to formally define the nation as a political concept dates back
Upaya
to
untuk mendefinisikan
1882 when
bangsa
French
sebagai konsep
philosopher and
politik
historian
secara
Ernest
formal
Renard
dimulai pada tahun
published his seminal essay
1882
titled,
secara filsuf
What is a
budaya
Nation?
Prancis Ernest Renan
In this essay,
menerbitkan
Renard
esainya yang
defines the
berjudul Apa itu
nation
bangsa.
as a large-scale
Dalam
solidarity
esai ini,
constituted
Renan
by the feeling of
mendefinisikan bangsa sebagai
sacrifices that one
solidaritas
made in the
yang
past and of
berskala
those
besar
that
yang
one is
dibentuk
separated
oleh
to make in the
perasaan dan
future.
pengorbanan yang telah dilakukan di masa
This
lalu dan
explains why
akan
Renard
dilakukan
believes
di
that
masa
if we are
depan.
to imagine the nation as good
Ini
and worthy of
menjelaskan mengapa
continuous
Renan percaya
sacrifice,
bahwa jika
we
kita
must
membayangkan
realize
bangsa
that it
sebagai sesuatu
necessarily
yang baik
entails
dan
a
layak
process
untuk
of forgetting.
pengorbanan yang terus-menerus, kita harus
This is
menyadari bahwa
because,
hal itu
for
tentu
Renard,
saja
the
melibatkan
efforts to obtain
proses
national
kelupaan.
unity, either in the
Ini
name of
karena,
civic or
menurut
ethnic
Renan, upaya
nationalism,
untuk
involve
mencapai
acts of
kesatuan
violence
nasional
and
baik
subsequent
atas nama
forgetting.
nasionalisme, sipil maupun
Based on the
etnis,
initial
melibatkan
conception of a
tindakan
nation
kekerasan
developed
dan
by
kelupaan
Renard,
kemudian.
scholars have come up with a
Berdasarkan
more formal
konsepsi
definition
awal
of a
bangsa yang
nation,
dikembangkan
namely,
oleh
a
Renan,
community of
para
people formed
sarjana
on the
telah
basis of a
mengembangkan
combination of
definisi
shared
bangsa yang
features
telah
such as language,
lebih formal,
history,
yaitu
ethnicity,
komunitas
culture,
orang
and
yang
territory.
terbentuk berdasarkan kombinasi
Put
fitur-fitur
differently, a nation
bersama
is the
seperti
collective
bahasa,
identity of a
sejarah,
group of people
etnisitas, budaya,
understood
dan
as
wilayah.
defined by language,
Dengan kata lain,
history,
bangsa adalah
ethnicity,
identitas
culture,
kolektif
and
dari
territory.
sekelompok orang yang
And for this
dipahami
reason,
sebagai
a nation
definisi
is
oleh
generally more
bahasa,
overtly political than
sejarah,
an ethnic
rutinitas,
group.
budaya,
In
dan
fact,
wilayah.
many
Oleh
scholars
karena itu,
considered it
bangsa
as a
umumnya lebih
fully
bersifat politik
mobilized
daripada
or
kelompok etnis.
institutionalized ethnic group.
Faktanya, banyak sarjana
Later on,
menganggapnya
the
sebagai
famous
kelompok
political
etnis yang
scientist
sepenuhnya
Benedict Anderson
dimobilisasi
views the
oleh
nation as an imagined community.
Kemudian ilmuwan politik
For Anderson,
terkenal
the
Benedict
nation is an
Anderson
imagined political community
melihat bangsa
that is
sebagai
culturally
komunitas
imagined
yang
as both
dibayangkan.
inherently limited and
Bagi
sovereign.
Anderson, bangsa adalah komunitas politik
As we
yang
can see,
dibayangkan
there are four key
yang
elements
secara
in this
budaya
definition.
dibayangkan sebagai
First, the
terbatas dan
nation is
berdaulat.
imagined simply because members of
Seperti yang
any
kita lihat,
particular
ada
nation
4
will never
elemen
meet
kunci
most of
dalam
their fellow
definisi ini.
members, yet in
Pertama,
the
bangsa
minds of each
dibayangkan
lives the
karena
image of
anggota
their
dari bangsa
communion.
tertentu tidak akan pernah bertemu
Second, the
dengan
nation is
sebagian besar
imagined as
anggota
limited
lainnya.
because it has
Namun,
finite,
dalam
yet
pikiran
sometimes
masing-masing
elastic,
terdapat
boundaries
gambaran tentang
beyond which other nations
kebersamaan
lie.
mereka. Kedua, bangsa dibayangkan
Third,
sebagai
the
terbatas
nation
karena
is
memiliki
imagined as
bantuan yang
sovereign
terbatas,
because the
tetapi
concept
kadang-kadang
of the nation
elastis di
itself
luar
was born
batas
in an
tersebut.
age
Terdapat
when the
bangsa.
Enlightenment and
Ketiga, bangsa
Revolution were
dibayangkan
destroying
sebagai
the
berdaulat
legitimacy
karena
of the
konsep bangsa
divinely
itu sendiri
ordained,
lahir pada
hierarchical dynastic
masa
realm.
ketika pencerahan dan revolusi menghancurkan
Finally, the
legitimasi
nation is
kekuasaan Inggris yang
imagined as a
ditegakkan oleh
community
ilahi.
because,
Terakhir,
regardless of the actual
bangsa
inequality
dibayangkan
and
sebagai
exploitation
komunitas
that may
karena
prevail within
terlepas
each,
dari
the nation is conceived
ketidaksertaan
as a
dan
deep,
eksploitasi
horizontal
yang mungkin
comradeship.
ada di dalamnya. Bangsa dianggap sebagai persahabatan horizontal yang mendalam.
Syntax is a law of
Sintaksis
language
adalah
that
hukum bahasa yang
determines the
menentukan
word order
urutan
and
kata dan
basic
struktur dasar
sentence
kalimat
structure
dalam
within
berbagai
the
bahasa.
different languages. Each language has
Setiap
a
bahasa
specific
memiliki
syntax
sintaksis
that
tertentu
tells
yang
the
memberitahu
speaker
pembicara
and
dan
the
pendengar
listener
bagaimana
which
dari
parts
kalimat
of the
yang datang
sentence
lebih
come
dulu untuk
first
membantu
to help
mereka
them make
memahami
sense
apa yang
of
sedang
what's being
dikatakan.
said. It's the guidelines
Ini
we
adalah
use
pedoman
when
yang kita
speaking
gunakan saat
and
berbicara
writing
dan
so
menulis
that
agar
sentences
kalimat
are
dapat dimengerti
understandable
dan
and
koheren.
coherent. Be wary of
Berhati-hatilah agar tidak
syntax or
bingung antara
semantics
sintaksis
with
atau semantik
diction.
dengan
These
diksi.
form the
Ini membentuk
backbone
tulang
of
punggung konstruksi
sentence
kalimat.
construction. So,
Jadi
let's
mari
break
kita
these
uraikan
definitions
definisi
down.
ini.
Syntax,
Sintaksis
as just
seperti yang
mentioned,
telah
is the order of the
disebutkan
words in
adalah
a
urutan
sentence.
kata-kata dalam kalimat.
Diction is a
Diksi adalah
specific
pemilihan
word
kata spesifik
choice
yang
meant to
dimaksudkan untuk
express
menyampaikan makna
certain
tertentu.
meanings. Semantics
Yang
is
dimaksud
the
untuk
meaning conveyed
semantik
by the
adalah makna yang
particular words
disampaikan oleh
used.
kata-kata tertentu yang digunakan.
We'll be focusing
Kita
on
akan fokus pada
syntax in this
sintaksis
video.
untuk
In
video
the
ini.
English language,
Dalam
there's
bahasa
a
Inggris
word
ada
order
urutan
that
kata yang
is
tepat
set in
untuk
stone
sebagian
for
besar
most
jenis
types
kalimat.
of
Tentu saja
sentences. Of course,
ada
there are always
pengecualian, tetapi
exceptions,
sebagian
but
besar
most
waktu
of the
kalimat
time,
bahasa Inggris benar
standard
akan
English
mengikuti urutan
sentences
kata
will follow an
SVO.
SVO word order. Subject,
Subjek,
verb,
predikat,
object.
objek,
As in,
seperti
the
dalam
boy looks
anak
outside
laki-laki
of
itu
the
melihat
window.
keluar
In this
jendela.
example sentence, we have the subject, boy,
Dalam
the
contoh kalimat
verb,
ini kita memiliki
looks, and
subjek,
the
anak laki-laki
object,
predikat, melihat
outside.
keadaan
This
objek.
image is
Keluar
an image
jendela
of an
gambar ini
English
adalah
grammar
sintaksis
syntax
tata
tree
bahasa
used
Inggris
by
yang digunakan oleh
linguists
ahli
to plot
bahasa
the structure of
untuk
sentences.
memplot struktur
You
kalimat.
may not often
Anda mungkin
encounter a
tidak sering
syntax
menemukan
tree,
pohon
but knowing
sintaksis,
how to
tapi
draw
mengetahui
one
cara
is
membuatnya
rather
cukup
useful
berguna
and will
dan
help you
akan membantu
understand
Anda
sentence
memahami
structure.
struktur kalimat.
In the chart, you can
Dalam
see
diagram,
that the
Anda dapat
sentence
melihat
is
bahwa
broken
kalimat
down
dipecah
into its
menjadi
parts,
bagiannya,
verbs,
kata
nouns,
kerja, kata
articles,
benda,
and
artikel, dan
prepositions.
preposisi.
After this
Setelah
step,
langkah
the
ini,
words are
kata-kata
grouped together
akan
to determine which parts
dikelompokkan
of the
bersama
sentence
untuk
are
menentukan
noun
bagaimana dari
phrases,
kalimat
prepositional
yang
phrases,
merupakan
or
frasa kata
verb
benda,
phrases. Fun
frasa
fact,
proposisi, atau
SVO
frasa
is
kata kerja.
not the only
Fakta
word order
menarik,
structure.
SVO bukan
Other
satu-satunya struktur
languages
urutan
vary
kata.
word order and
Bahasa
even
lain
include additional
bervariasi.
components in their
Urutan
syntax. In the example given with the
kata-kata
syntax
bahkan
tree, the
menyertakan komponen
subject is
tambahan dalam
cat, the
sintaksis
verb
mereka.
is sat, and the object is
Dalam
cat.
contoh yang
The
diberikan
second
dengan
picture
penuh
is
sintaksis,
another way
subjeknya
in
adalah
which
kucing.
syntax can be written out.
Kata
This
kerjanya
diagram
adalah duduk,
takes the
dan
sentence,
objeknya
the
adalah
dog
tikar.
loved the
Gambar
girl,
kedua adalah
and
cara lain
breaks
di
it
mana
down into
sintaksis dapat
articles,
ditulis.
nouns,
Diagramnya mengambil
verbs, noun
dog loves the
phrases,
girl dan
and verb
memecahnya menjadi
phrases,
artikel di
just like
kata
the
benda N,
previous
kata
example.
kerja V, frasa
In this
kata benda
sentence, the
NV, dan
subject is
frasa
dog,
kata
the
kerjanya
verb is
V
loved,
seperti
and the
contoh
object
sebelumnya.
is
Dalam
girl.
kalimat ini,
Again, the
subjeknya adalah
syntax
anjing.
trees are not to be intimidating,
Kata
but are
kerjanya
used
adalah
to better
menunjuki
understand
tetapi
the
digunakan untuk
structure of a
lebih memahami
sentence
struktur kalimat
and
dan
to reveal each
mengungkapkan
part's
tujuan
purpose within the sentence.
serta
An
setiap bagian
additional
dalam
use for
kalimat.
syntax trees is
Gunaannya
that whenever a
tambahan pohon
different word
sintaksis
order
adalah
is
bahwa
used for
setiap
a
kali
sentence,
urutannya kali
it can
yang
be
berbeda
decoded. For
digunakan untuk
example, if
kalimat
you are
itu dapat
hearing a
diuraikan
sentence
dengan
in a foreign
mendapatkan diagram
language
seperti
that
contoh di
follows a
atas.
VSO
Misalnya,
order
jika
or
Anda
some
mendengar
other
kalimat dalam
variation,
bahasa asing
creating a
yang
syntax
mengikuti
tree
urutan
for that
VSO
sentence can
atau
help
variasi
you to
lainnya,
put the words in
membuat pohon
SVO order
sintaksis untuk
so
kalimat
that you
itu
might understand
dapat
what's
membantu
being
Anda
said.
menempatkan
Let's
kata-kata
have
lain
a
dalam
recap.
urutan SVO sehingga Anda
1.
dapat memahami apa yang
Syntax is
dikatakan.
the
Mari
sentence
kita rekap. 1.
structure.
Sintaksis adalah
2.
struktur kalimat.
Diction is
2.
the choosing of
Diksi adalah
words to
pemilihan
relay a
kata untuk
certain
menyampaikan
meaning.
makna
3.
tertentu. 3.
Semantics is the
Semantik adalah
meaning that
makna yang
is
disampaikan dari
expressed from
kata-kata
the
yang
words
digunakan.
used. 4.
4.
Syntax trees
Sintaksis
are a
adalah alat
neat
grafik
graphing tool to chart
yang
sentence
rapi untuk
structure
memplot
and make
struktur
sense
kalimat
of
dan
word
memahami
order
urutan
and
kata serta
how it's
bagaimana
functioning
fungsinya
in the
dalam dunia
world of
bahasa Inggris.
English. Thanks for
Terima
joining us
kasih telah
for this
bergabung dengan
syntax
kami
tutorial.
dalam
If
tutorial
you found this
sintaksis
video
ini.
to be
Jika
helpful,
Anda merasa
check
video
out the
ini
rest of our
bermanfaat,
channel for
lihat
additional
saluran
help.
kami untuk
See you guys
makin
next time.
Sampai jumpa lagi.
For almost a decade, scientists chased the source of a deadly new virus through China's tallest mountains and most isolated caverns. They finally found it here, in the bats of Shitao Cave. The virus in question was a coronavirus that caused an epidemic of severe acute respiratory syndrome, or SARS, in 2003. Coronaviruses are a group of viruses covered in little protein spikes that look like a crown, or corona in Latin. There are hundreds of known coronaviruses. 7 of them infect humans and can cause disease. The coronavirus SARS-CoV causes SARS. MERS-CoV causes MERS, and SARS-CoV-2 causes the disease COVID-19. Of the 7 human coronaviruses, 4 cause colds, mild, highly contagious infections of the nose and throat. 2 infect the lungs and cause much more severe illnesses. The 7th, which causes COVID-19, has features of each. It spreads easily, but can severely impact the lungs. When an infected person coughs, droplets containing the virus spray out. The virus can infect a new person when the droplets enter their nose or mouth. Coronaviruses transmit best in enclosed spaces where people are close together. Cold weather keeps their delicate casing from drying out, enabling the virus to survive for longer between hosts, while UV exposure from sunlight may damage it. These seasonal variations matter more for established viruses, but because no one is yet immune to a new virus, it has so many potential hosts that it doesn't need ideal conditions to spread. In the body, the protein spikes embed in the host cells and fuse with them, enabling the virus to hijack the host cell's machinery to replicate its own genes. Coronaviruses store their genes on RNA. All viruses are either RNA viruses or DNA viruses. RNA viruses tend to be smaller, with fewer genes, meaning they infect many hosts and replicate quickly in those hosts. In general, RNA viruses don't have a proofreading mechanism, whereas DNA viruses do. So when an RNA virus replicates, it's much more likely to have mistakes, called mutations. Many of these mutations are useless or even harmful, but some make the virus better suited for certain environments, like a new host species. Epidemics often occur when a virus jumps from animals to humans. This is true of the RNA viruses that cause the Ebola, Zika, and SARS epidemics, and the COVID-19 pandemic. Once in humans, the virus still mutates, usually not enough to create a new virus, but enough to create variations or strains of the original one. Coronaviruses have a few key differences from most RNA viruses. They're some of the largest, meaning they have the most genes. That creates more opportunity for harmful mutations. To counteract this risk, coronaviruses have a unique feature, an enzyme that checks for replication errors and corrects mistakes. This makes coronaviruses much more stable, with a slower mutation rate than other RNA viruses. While this may sound formidable, the slow mutation rate is actually a promising sign when it comes to disarming them. After an infection, our immune systems can recognize germs and destroy them more quickly if they infect us again, so they don't make us sick. But mutations can make a virus less recognizable to our immune systems, and therefore more difficult to fight off. They can also make antiviral drugs and vaccines less effective because they're tailored very specifically to a virus. That's why we need a new flu vaccine every year. The influenza virus mutates so quickly that new strains pop up constantly. The slower mutation rate of coronaviruses means our immune systems, drugs, and vaccines might be able to recognize them for longer after infection, and therefore protect us better. Still, we don't know how long our bodies remain immune to different coronaviruses. There's never been an approved treatment or vaccine for a coronavirus. We haven't focused on treating the ones that cause colds, and though scientists began developing treatments for SARS and MERS, the epidemics ended before those treatments completed clinical trials. As we continue to encroach on other animals' habitats, some scientists say a new coronavirus jumping to humans is inevitable. But if we investigate these unknowns, it doesn't have to be devastating. Students and teachers all over the world did their part to help slow the spread of COVID-19 by staying home. But what about their graduation ceremonies? Learn more about TED's global campaign to celebrate and elevate the hopes and ideas of an entire generation. Get involved at ted.com/graduation.